Bienvenidos todos, bienvenidos a la Galería Octubre, ahora en sus 40 años. Bienvenido especialmente a todos que les gustan las montañas, la Cordillera. Welcome to October Gallery, now in its 40th year, and a special welcome to all who love mountains. A welcome to Jordan Craig, who has come here from New Mexico with her mom, and we're so happy that you are here, Jordan Craig. The mountain chain that runs from Alaska all the way down through the United States, the Southwest, down to the southern part of Mexico, is called many names. It's called the Pacific Cordillera, the Western Cordillera, the North American Cordillera. It's the mountains, it's hardy, it's igneous rock, it's metamorphic rock. And those who live here long ago were pushed there by all the other cultures coming in. We are hardy and we are survivors. It's interesting to me that this Jordan, who comes Cheyenne and who is inspired by the cultures of the Southwest, this temperature and the rainfall there is 14 inches a year. It's like the same annual rainfall as the Huichol territory that I visited in Nueva Colonia. Water is scarce, and the territory is harsh. But these artists have done the most beautiful work in the most extraordinary conditions. And all of us eat corn, beans, squash, and hunt deer. All of those peoples, that's our staple. Also, it's interesting to me that the Huichol people speak a Ute Aztec language, the same language group of the people, native peoples that I grew up with in Colorado. The teaching of biospherics is that everything is related to everything else. And the traditions and art of native people of the Americas make this clear, especially so in the Huichol work of this exhibition. And so it was also in organizing this exhibition. Mike J., who was to publish the book Mescaline, asked me, would I be interested in curating an exhibition inspired by this publication? Yes, I replied, of course. So an epic journey began. I spent October 2018 traveling in my native land of the Southwest of Arizona, New Mexico desert. And it was thanks to Karen Boston, who used to live and work here, that I met Jordan Craig. Then, this last October 2019, I spent quite an adventure in quite a different locale. But it's the same connectivity. Mike introduced me to Guy Ogilvy, this fabulous creature here. Guy Ogilvy then introduced me to Humberto Fernandez in Mexico City. And it's through Humberto Fernandez that I could go up and meet Alejandro Lopez Torres, whom we showed 20 years ago, and Rotapua, whom we showed 20 years ago. And it's all these connectivities. Humberto then said, you have to go with this driver, Rigoberto. He will drive you in a bus up to Nueva Colonia. Call this phone number. And that's the way it has been throughout these journeys of connectivities and the right moments. It so happened that Humberto Fernandez worked with John Luddy Jr., who was a dear friend of many people here, his father especially, to curate, who helped us in the show 20 years ago. And this Fundación Humana is the ones who are actually protecting the Huichol people's lands. Right now, the Canadians are trying to invade their lands, especially in northern New Mexico, and they're fighting fiercely for these lands. And so it's Humberto Fernandez who actually is working to protect them, and he's just dedicated his life to do this. It was not very far away from meeting Alejandro Lopez Torres, who has a great being, who is no longer working, but being with him was fabulous for me. I lived with his family, I learned how to make tortillas, I had an open fire, many things. One day, up in the high pines, he took me even further, at least a couple of hours walk, to meet a man named Antoni Carrillo. And that's the man who made the masks in the next room. This man lives in the middle of the pine forest, and he survives beautifully there. And this is where many of these peoples live, because that's where they can live. Another marvelous artist in this exhibition is this man, Gonzalo Hernandez Carrillo, whose details of the cosmogony of the Huichol universe is profound. And you can read an explanation by each painting. He was introduced to me by Susana Valadez, and Susana now lives and works in a town called Huejuquilla, which is partly a Huichol community, and with whom we worked 20 years ago as well. She also introduced me to the man who did the beautiful photograph next door, Bogoslav Mashle, who lived and worked up in the north where the Huichol Indians are. And you will see a beautiful film by Jonathan Greet, our dear own house designer, who did this film on Huichol ceremony, which I advise all of you to see. Jonathan is here.
I jump briefly into this quiet moment. It was a great experience to hang this exhibition. Then I found myself in the middle of this room yesterday. I found myself between the works of old and new, between the works of the brilliant young artist Jordan Ann Craig and the works of wise old Huichol artists Santos Moto Apahua and Gonzalo Hernandez Carrillo, who looking at each other from different sides of the room. And this is juxtaposition I would not necessarily ever have dreamt of unless the paintings had not arrived here. So it was a wonderful, wonderful surprise. So standing in the middle between these different yet so related works, I suddenly found myself hearing different sounds of this universe. And even when I walked out into the street, it seemed to me as time and space were colliding today. And I found myself in an even greater multidimensional world. So this, I think, is due to the juxtaposition of these artists. I myself have traveled to two of the places the artists come from. In 1984, I traveled to Santa Fe, and I stayed for about 4 months near Santa Fe. So Jordan Ann Craig encountered Pueblo designs in Santa Fe, and some of her works in the other room are dedicated to this. And although now she works more with Cheyenne design, which you see behind me, which is defined by these long stripes, I can see the light of Santa Fe shining through her work. When you go there, the light is so brilliant. The mountains are so transparent. It's an extraordinary experience. I encountered an ultramarine blue object in the middle of the desert, and this is something I will never forget. I encountered true color. Truth, in that sense, blue was standing in front of me, and now it is standing behind me. Some years later, I had a studio in Puerto Vallarta, which is near the Sierra Madre, where the Huichol Indians live. And I was trying to inspire myself. I inspired myself by the very dramatic Pacific skies, which are extraordinary, but also by the work of the Huichol Indians. I was particularly attracted to their sacred geometry, to the 5 directions of the world, and started to incorporate that in my work. So I have very fond memories of that time, and I'm so glad to meet the artists here again. And I want to say, and I realized today that I was talking about experiences that were 30 and 35 years ago. And that gave me a shock because it seemed like yesterday. But I want to thank the artists for coming back here to be with me, and I want to thank Jimmy for bringing them. Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce to you Mike J., who is the cause of it all. Wow. Mike J., his new book, Mescaline, is right here, ready for sale. Mike is a writer and cultural historian. He was the curator consultant to Kew Gardens on their intoxication season in 2014, and the external curator on the Welcome Collections High Society exhibition in 2011, for which he wrote an accompanying book. When you Google him, you will see many books that he's written. This Way Madness Lies, High Society, The Influencing Machine, Atmosphere of Heaven. You can see what he's interested in. I introduce you one of the most profound writers, Mike J.
Well, thank you so much, Chile. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all for coming. I feel like the lucky one here because the amount of work that I did on this show compared to what Chile did, it's really, I guess it started with a conversation with Chile while I was researching my book about mescaline and looking at the history of peyote, the visionary cactus, which is indigenous to the northern deserts of Mexico and a little bit over the border in Texas, and I was following its long history in Mexico, recorded as far back as the Spanish conquest, but going much, much further back than that. And then in the what I was particularly interested in was how, in the late 19th century, it was adopted by the Plains tribes in the southwest United States, and this was during the period of forced captivity on the reservations, and it was the moment when the Texas Railroad appeared, and peyote was suddenly encountered by all these tribes, in the newly constituted United States, who'd never encountered it before, and this emerged through many, many years of trials and tribulations into a religion, the Native American Church, which is still thriving today. So I think I made contact with Chile while I was researching this story because I was looking for some Huichol art for the plate section of the book, and I thought immediately of the exhibition that was right here 20 years ago, Sacred Visions, which was I think, looking at it now with hindsight, it was a groundbreaking exhibition of Huichol art, such as we'd never seen in London before. And in the course of a conversation about this, we talked about all the Native American art that I'd seen on my travels in all kinds of styles and genres, which I'd never really seen in galleries here. And that started Chile on her epic quest and mission. First of all in New Mexico, working out of Santa Fe, but discovering the most extraordinary work, hidden away, by artists, producing stuff that I'd never seen anything like. And then, just a few months ago, another huge epic mission to Mexico, to the Sierra Huichol, to the Western Sierra Madre, and I think what the work that she's brought back is amazing, and it tells this story, the same theme in a way that I was following. That on the one hand, these are very, very remote, inaccessible mountains and high deserts. As Chile said, a lot of the people who live there precisely because they're remote and inaccessible. These are people, who've retreated there to preserve their cultures. So this part of the Cordillera, running from the US down to Mexico, is full of cultures with incredibly deep roots. But it's also a part of the world that's always been very restlessly busy with trade and exchange. Centuries before Europeans ever visited, there were objects and beliefs and practices being traded up and down the Cordillera. I was in New Mexico last month at Chaco Canyon, where you see these 1,000-year-old remains of the ancestral Puebloan civilizations, and large storehouses that were found to be full of the feathers of tropical birds, macaws and quetzals. So these must have come, from southern Mexico. They must have come from the jungle, from the Mayan area, all the way up the Cordillera to the dry, now very arid desert of New Mexico. So we think of this border today, and we know that it's one of the busiest land borders in the world between the US and Mexico, and we hear a lot about the guns and the drugs. We don't hear so much about all the other cultural exchanges which have been going on up and down across this border, from the time long before the US and Mexico border existed. And so I think that's one of the motifs that emerged for me from my researches, and which is so beautifully expressed in the work here, is this dialogue between tradition and innovation. On the one hand, you have these very, very deeply rooted traditional indigenous cultures, and on the other hand, there's a constant rebalancing of relations with the changing world outside, new things coming and going, and a very dynamic culture. This is not an area where traditional cultures remain the same century after century. This is an area where, even coming back after 20 years, so the 20 years between, the last exhibition here and here, Huichol art has changed enormously. And that dialogue, I think, is expressed in all these works in different ways, and it's wonderful to bring the works from both sides of the border together and to use the Cordillera to connect them. So I think we're very, very privileged here in London to be able to get these privileged, intimate glimpses from inside the Cordillera. So thanks, and I'd like us to raise a toast to Jordan and to all the other artists, to Chile and to Elizabeth and to everybody at the October Gallery for bringing this to us.
Yay.
Hello, my name is Jordan Ann Craig. I'm a proud Northern Cheyenne painter and printmaker. So you can see some of my work behind me. Thank you. And the work is studying Cheyenne and Pueblo work. I'm Northern Cheyenne and Zuni. And a lot of these works are about my own tribe and also the landscape around me. So I hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Special thanks to Chile and Elizabeth here at October Gallery. Everyone else I've been emailing from Roswell, New Mexico to get here, and it's been a true honor. So thank you, enjoy the work, and please feel free to ask me any questions.
Jordan Ann will give a talk this Saturday at 1:30 here in the gallery about her work. Mike J. will give a talk about his publication, Nestler, on the 7th of December at 3 p.m. We will show Echo de la Montaña, a film, Echo from the Mountains, a film by Nicolas Echevarria on the life of Motapua, Santos Motapua de la Torre from Valparaiso, Zacatecas. He's now 78. I stayed with him and his family for several days. He's doing very well, and he's with us in spirit for sure tonight. I wish to fully thank the October Gallery staff who supported me while I was in the mountains, especially Dee Hockney. Dee, where are you? Oliver Place, Duncan Mulberry, Paige Ashley, and others who were with me all the time, and of course Johnny Grieve is always here, and Elizabeth Lalouchek, our beloved artistic director, and Gerard Houghton, of course, who helped with these texts. So I especially thank you all for being there.